Anyway, John eventually came downstairs after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and said, "This is what I want you to sing. Power to the people." We did it. He said, came down again after a couple of tries, and he said, "Can you be a bit more aggressive? Can you stomp your feet? If you hear the record, that's the first thing you hear on the record is these marching feet. That's us." He said, if you stomp your feet, make it a bit more aggressive. And he moved the carpet. So he said, "No, I don't want the carpet. I want really loud noise," because there was dust coming up from the carpet. Then he came back down again and said, "Can you do it really like?" So we did it with our arms up, Black Power, or power to the people, power, and that's all you can hear that. And that was it. We did it in a couple of takes. That was it.
Madeline Bell, this is an incredible honor, because you are someone who has been involved not only in your own career, but in so many other people's career, that you have had, or you've made an amazing contribution to popular music in your life, and popular music in the widest terms, in the music terms, from gospel to soul to jazz, to the height of the pop charts, everything
as well.
Yeah, no, I know. There's no end to it, Madeline. There's no end to your talents here. Now, I want to start really going back and just to find out, when you were growing up in Newark, New Jersey, what sort of music did your parents listen to? What was your first sort of musical impressions at that time?
Take a guess. Gospel.
Oh, and it was gospel, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
That's all there was in the house, except for when my grandmother, who had been a dancer in the Cotton Club, when her friends used to come around, they would all sit and reminisce about the old days and everything. And then, they might put on some Billie Holiday or Louis Jordan or something like that on the Victrola, as they called it. Yeah. So, but otherwise, it was basically all gospel music in my house. And yeah, that was it.
Music, yeah. Music obviously played a role through gospel, but the church played a massive role, particularly for the Black community in America. What role was that? Can you tell me what it was and how it brought the community together?
Well, first of all, everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's business as well. And it was a community. It was like family, because you didn't have much. So that was the place that you went for entertainment. You could eat at church as well. There was always some food being cooked and sold at the church, always raising money for church. It was just, and it was a good place. They had sections, areas in the church for kids. Like I was in the children's choir when I was a kid. Then I got into the ladies' choir, then the mixed choir. Then there was always something going on. There was always music going on, always gospel music. And it was always piano and Hammond organ. That's all we had at the time. And no microphones.
So when did people realize, hey, this girl's got a voice? When did that come?
Well, I was in a couple of groups. My first group was called Four Jacks and a Jill. Guess who Jill was? And we never made any money. We were only about 13, 14 years old. The most money we ever made, we went for an audition in Harrison, New Jersey. And they paid us $2 each bus fare, and we walked all the way home. It was, we sang and walked all the way home. Yeah.
Were you in? Oh, so I'll come in. I can see the door opening and someone's coming in. Yeah. That was just a breeze. Okay.
The worst storms and everything here. Everything is yesterday. Everything, everywhere you looked, even the sky was orange, because it's all blown up from the Sahara. I'm looking at orange mud as we speak.
Yeah, Madeline's going to make everyone jealous because she lives in Spain. She's now telling us that we're saying she's having a hard time, but it's in Spain. We know you're having the time of your life.
The rain is real pain at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
So what was I talking about?
Well, I just wondered if your parents encouraged you, or your grandmother encouraged you. Who encouraged you to really take a look
My
at your singing.
encouraged me because I mean, when you say parents, I mean, my mom was only 15 years older than me, and my father was 17, 18 years older than me, but he was never in my life, even though they ran off and eloped and got married. And 9 months later, my mom had my sister, and I only saw my sister for the first time when I was 19. And then we never met up again until 2001. So I spent most of my life never knowing my family. And I still don't know anything about them, really, seriously. So I was raised by this woman named Madeline White, or Maddie as everybody called her. And she was the best friend of my biological grandmother who died in a fire. So this woman raised my mother, and then she raised me. So that's parents as far as anybody is concerned. It was Maddie White who raised me. And she didn't have much of an education, but she had common sense like you wouldn't believe. I mean, I quote her basically every day because everything she told me was right.
So give me an example. What sort of advice did she give you for life that you've held on to?
Well, first of all, she used to say to me, the best money to spend is your own. So I had a job. I was making money when I was like 9, 10 years old. I was babysitting and running around doing errands for older people, running and paying their bills for them and walking home and keeping the bus fare. You know, they gave me bus fare and they would pay me $1 to do it. And I did everything. I babysat, I delivered flowers on Mother's Day. I delivered prescriptions from the local pharmacy to different establishments. I mean, I earned my own money right up until now.
I mean, you mentioned about the church and what role it played. Newark has an amazing history of singers that came from Newark. And there's one family in particular, you know, the Houstons, Cissy Houston, Whitney Houston, Dionne Warwick.
The Drink Gods. That's the family.
The Drink Gods?
No, Drink Gods. Drinkards. Drink Gods.
Ah, Drink Gods. Okay.
Drink God. Yeah, and that was the family. That was Cissy Houston was Cissy Drinkard. She married, I think his name was John Houston. Yeah, but before him, first of all, my church choir and the New Hope Baptist Church Choir used to compete every fourth Sunday of the month, where we would go to their church or they would come to our church. But they had Cissy Houston, Dionne, Dee Dee, who was an incredible singer. These people were in the choir. So, I mean, every time we competed, they always won because they had the best singers in the choirs. Yeah. But people always say Dionne was Whitney's aunt. No, they were cousins. Dionne's mother and Whitney's mother were sisters. That's how it worked out. Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, what a wealth of talent, you know, in one community. I think that's incredible. Do you see a reason behind that? Is there a social reason behind why that's the case?
I really couldn't tell you that. A lot of talent came out of New Jersey, and most of it they originated from the South, and they ended up in New Jersey. And my mom's best friend was Sarah Vaughan. They grew. I think Sarah was 2 years, maybe 3 years older than my mother, but my mother could do hair, and she did Sarah Vaughan's hair when Sarah Vaughan went over to the Apollo on talent night, Wednesday night talent night, and won. My mom had done her hair.
Oh wow! So did you hear those people sing?
Jerry Lewis came from Jerry Lewis, and I was slung out of the same high school, not at the same time, but Jerry Lewis was from Newark, New Jersey as well. I mean, Newark really produced a lot of talent.
Yeah, it's amazing. In terms of, we talked today about representation and about figures, and you know, I'm a gay man, and in the 70s, I had and I had no one to look at and to say, you know, this could be where I want to be in life. This is sort of my hero, an out gay man who would have been on TV or successful or whatever. They didn't really exist, of course, until the late 70s, 80s when things opened up. In your era, I mean, I say in your era, there was racism is, you know, everywhere today. In your era, it was so endemic and so difficult to have figures that where you could look up to for yourself. Were there people that you looked up to at that period?
There weren't a lot. My first idol was Sam Cooke. I started there, right? Everybody else, it was always so, you know, I mean, I grew up listening to Mahalia Jackson, whom I got the pleasure of meeting at one point when I was with Alex Bradford. But all of my heroes were gospel singers and things, you know, and if we on radio station WNJR, that was our local radio station, and I think it was like Sundays they would play gospel music. If there was, you know, like the latest that had come out, you know, the Soul Stirrers and but it was all gospel. So the only heroes I had were gospel singers until I left school and got a job and started listening to the radio more.
So this listening to the radio at that point, what sort of music were you listening to? Was that R&B?
Yeah, I worked, my first job, proper job, was in the supermarket, and I was at the back because I was a meat wrapper, and I was in control of the radio. So I used to listen to all of this stuff like the Flamingos and Eddie, my love, I love you so, you know, all of the doo-wop groups and things like that, and all the stars out in the shoop-up, I knew all of the stuff. And it used to blare out, and the boss used to tell me, Madeline, turn that radio down. But that's what I was listening to, because it was basically, it was new to me because I wasn't allowed to listen to it in the house. But then as I got older and started watching, and then we got a television and we watched American Bandstand, and everybody wanted to watch when Sam Cooke was on, because he was one of the very few Black people, if not the only one, who was ever allowed on television. You know, so our heroes came through the radio.
When did you first encounter racism as a young person that you really knew what it was?
Well, I mean, there were experiences, of course, when I was younger. You know, I mean, I even had problems. I had a mixed race teacher who was he didn't like the dark students, seriously. And he and I had a bit of a run-in when I was about 12 years old. And he grabbed me in my collar, and I told him to take his damn hands off me. And he reported me to the principal, and the principal called my grandmother, who came marching down to school ready to kick my butt. Then the kids came home from my class, came home with me to tell my grandmother what really happened. And my grandmother turned up the next day and told the teacher in no uncertain, because she was mixed race as well. You know, she'd been born, her mother had been a slave. So, so she knew what racism was, and she knew what the problem was anyway. But the one time that I actually really experienced it wasn't when I was 19, and I had to go to New Orleans on the bus from Newark. That was 2 days and 2 nights. The rest, and that's when I was with Alex Bradford, and the rest of the singers, they were doing something else that they had already been booked for, and I wasn't part of that. So I was on this bus for 2 days and 2 nights down through the South, and that's when I started to experience real racism. Fortunately, the bus was stopping at designated Greyhound stops, but on the way back, we came back by car. And Alex Bradford had a Cadillac, but there was all 6 of us in the Cadillac. And some of the places that we had to stop, they didn't like the idea that we were in a Cadillac. They didn't like the idea that we were Black. And we had to go around the back to a window to order some food. We had to go into a little hut and use the toilet that was a hole in the ground, and had telephone book for toilet paper. This was about a year before I came to Europe.
What does that do to someone? I mean, because I can't imagine that. I mean, I can hear what you're saying, and I can try and imagine being in that situation, but I can't imagine what that would do to me. That would make me so angry. And
it made me angry, and of course Alex Bradford, and bear in mind you say you're gay. I was in a group with 5 guys and they were all gay. And they took care of me. They took care of me. And all they had, every one of them had a knife. They didn't have guns because they didn't have guns. But everybody had a knife so that they could try and protect themselves, because it was a hard life. It was hard. The Chitlin circuit, oh God. Some of the stories that have come out from the Chitlin circuit, and I mean, we didn't experience that, but we did experience some heavy stuff down there. So, and the reason why I wasn't going to school, and I got expelled from school, because they weren't teaching me what my grandmother was telling me. And she had experienced it, and so had her mother. But America did not teach Black history at all. No Black history. All they taught was white history. And if slaves, I don't even think slaves were ever mentioned. They kept all of that out of the history books, which is what they're trying to do now. Keep so much out of the history books. And this is what was happening in America at the time, things that were going on in America. And Emmett Till, that really did it. That kid that they beat to death, that really did it. That showed the world. Thankfully, his mother said, I want the world to see this. This is what America was like and is still like. It's just, they keep bits quiet, and thankfully that orange clown has given all of these racists and homophobics and whatever, he's given them a platform. So that's America. I don't even want to go back. And this is my big birthday coming up in July. And I tried to go back, but the ticket prices are too expensive. You know, it would cost me over $1,000 to go back to the States. I could spend that $1,000 on some friends and have a nice dinner.
You mentioned Alex Bradford, who was a pivotal person, I would think, in your life. Can you tell me how you met him, and tell me the type of person he was and his type of performance?
I had been singing with a group called the Glover Tones. That was my first gospel group. And we used to travel back and forth over the weekend to North Carolina or Connecticut and places like that, and come home with $5 each. And I just thought, this ain't no money. After a while, I decided I'd had enough. Everybody went back to Newark. We were in Connecticut, but I stayed because Alex Bradford was on, and I wanted to see him. And I stayed I think I must have been at somebody's house or something like that. And Alex Bradford saw me, and he said, aren't you that singer from, you that little girl from the Glover Tones? I said, yeah. He said, do you want to come and join my group? Yeah. The girl who had been singing with them, I think her name was Judy, got pregnant. So they needed a girl singer. And that's how I got the job. And he only lived, I could walk to his house from where I worked was halfway between where I lived and where he lived. Because everything was close by. So I could walk to Alex Bradford's in 10 minutes from home. So we used to rehearse, and I would go from the supermarket to his house because it was just up the road. And he lived around the corner from Sarah Vaughan's parents, whom I used to deliver groceries to and didn't know who they were for a while.
But he also made an amazing contribution because of his own style. Can you tell me about that as well?
All I know is Alex Bradford, he wrote everything, and he had so many different names, trying to sell his music. He was always Richard King. I always remember that was his name when he would sell stuff, because he was just very flamboyant. He conducted the Abyssinian Baptist Church choir. Everybody knew he was gay. It didn't matter. He was a beautiful guy. He could cook. Oh God, could he cook? His home was always like, he had a flat it was 19 Stratford Place. That was the address in Newark. And his place was like open house, especially on Sunday after church. Sunday after, we'd be in church Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and Sunday evening for the Sunday evening broadcast. And then afterwards, everybody would come back to Alex Bradford's house, and he had bottles of scotch, whiskey, gin in these it was like, I don't know how, maybe a gallon, and they were in like a container, and you just pulled it forward to pour, because you didn't have to lift the bottle. I remember seeing them as well. And all these gospel ladies, they all loved him. They all were in love with Alex Bradford. And there was no way.
But he was also...
He took care of me, and he went to my grandmother when Black Nativity came up. He went to my grandmother and told her that we had been asked to go to Europe and that he would take care of me, and he did.
Okay, I'll come on to Black Nativity in a second, but I just want to end with Alex Bradford, and because his importance is in terms of people like Little Richard and Ray Charles and people like that who were...
I met Little Richard. We met Little Richard in Hamburg at the Star Club with Billy Preston, who was 16 years old at the time, on Hammond organ. And Ray Charles came to Black Nativity when we were at the 41st Street Theater. Before it ever came to Europe or before anybody knew about it. This is when, Black people, all the Black entertainers were supporting, because it was the first off-Broadway Black show, written by Langston Hughes. So, Alex.
I mean, that was revolutionary in its way, wasn't it, at that time? And this is during this is in the middle of the civil rights movement, and in an era where I presume just by having a show like that, you know, was an amazing statement and something to be involved in. How did that feel for you as a Black person to be involved in something like that at that time?
So, you know, I mean, for me, I was just so starstruck. I mean, it was, first I'd come over to New York, and I got a chance to be in New York, staying in a hotel. There I am, 19 years old. Wow. And I'm in a musical off Broadway. You know, all of this was like Hollywood as far as we were all concerned. We're going to be in a musical off Broadway. What? This is unbelievable. At 19 years old, I mean, I was so green, so very green. And I'm still green.
Oh, I bet you weren't green for long there.
Yeah, but it was just such a beautiful, for me now, thinking about it, was just such a beautiful experience at my age to get the chance to do all of that. Before even, I turned 20 when I was in London. But, you know, before I was 20 years old, this was all happening to me before then. So.
You came to London because of Black Nativity, didn't you? It was something that then toured or came over to the UK. When did the moment come where you decided, okay, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to make a career. I don't know if you thought of it in that way, but you must have had some idea.
First of all, we came over to Europe. We were supposed to be in Italy for 4 weeks, fly to London to record the show for Associated Rediffusion Television. Yeah. While we were in the studio, another guy came, just like the one who had brought us to Italy. Another guy came and said, I have the lease of a theater in the West End, and I'd like to put the show on. He put this to the producers, and they agreed. That was at the Criterion. We were staying at the Regent Palace Hotel right across the road. We were supposed to be in London for 2 weeks, and I'm still here. That was in June, early July, 1962. And funnily enough, I'm doing a gig at Crazy Coq's on the 27th of June, and it will be almost exactly 60 years that I was across the road.
Wow, that's
Crazy
incredible.
Circus as well. And we used to, the Regent Palace Hotel, you had to cross Piccadilly Circus to get to Criterion, cross 5 minutes across the road. Here I am repeating history again. But I mean, I've had a lovely life, you know. I mean, I've been very blessed. All I can say is I've really been blessed. I mean, a lot of things have happened to me that weren't so nice, but a lot of more things have happened that I remember. Things that weren't, you learn by it and then push it away.
Dusty Springfield was a figure in terms of you staying in London, wasn't she? Because you actually worked with her. Was that one of the reasons why you stayed?
No. On the last week that we were in London doing Black Nativity, this man named Norman Newell came backstage and said, "My name is Norman Newell and I'm from EMI Records and I'd like to sign you up." That was in August 1963. Yeah. I went home with everybody else because that was the end of all the runs. We had spent 14 months at what was supposed to be 6 weeks, turned into 14 months in Europe. I went home, told my grandmother that I'd been offered a record contract and that I wanted to go back to London. And she just said to me in no uncertain terms, "Honey, opportunity very seldom knocks more than once. Go over. If it doesn't work out, you know you always got a home to come back to," which is what I did. Then I came back to Europe, recorded, and then had to start working. And I did all the American bases in the UK and in Germany. And I mean, I paid my dues for over a year. And I had a record out. So it meant that I was doing Ready, Steady, Go, which meant that I could go into Ready, Steady, Go all the time because I'd been an artist. So I was always there. And New Year's Eve, 1964, Dusty Springfield came over to me and said, "You're that singer I've heard about. Do you do sessions?" And I didn't even know what a session was, but I was so hungry at the time. And she took my number. 2 days later, having agreed to a job in the International Cinema in Westbourne Grove at 6 guineas a week for 11 hours a day. 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, 6 guineas a week. I get the call when I come back home. Can you ring this number? I rang this number and it was Johnny Franz's secretary, who's Dusty's record producer. "Can you do a session for Dusty tomorrow?" Yes. What was the fee for 3 hours? 6 guineas. And that was it. I never looked back after that. So Dusty gave me my very first session. And then it snowballed to the point where we were doing her TV series and doing all of her backings. And then I started getting my own work. But Dusty gave me my first gig. And to this day, I still thank her because I have to say to everybody, she is the reason why I'm still here. If she hadn't given me a break, I would have had to go back to Newark.
Was there a community of singers at that point? Because the 60s, you know, as in a sort of cliche term, we have this cliche of it as being, you know, the decade of sexual
Decadent.
Awareness. I don't know, a lot of fun, I would have thought, actually.
Yeah.
But was there a big community of singers, and did you hang out together and did you help each other, or was there sort of a competitive spirit?
Well, the first singers I met were the backing singers in the studio. That was in November 1963. This is before I met Dusty and everything. And they were the Breakaways, who did everybody's backing vocals. And it was the first time I'd ever worked with white people, which was an amazing thing, you know, white entertainers. And they were so nice to me and so helpful and everything. And we compared our chewed up nails and all of that. That's what it was like. Eventually, when I started getting more work, the singers, we would congregate in the studios because that's where we would see each other. So it was myself and Leslie Duncan, of course. And then Dusty's manager, Vic Billings, he brought Kiki down from Bradford. So Kiki was one of the backing singers as well. And then it got to be more and more. There was the Mike Sam singers. I mean, I would get booked for sessions for them. And I didn't read. They all read music, but sometimes they wanted a certain sound or something like that. So they would get me to come in. But it wasn't like we would meet up and jam or anything like that. The only place we would jam would be in the studios, because we had to take, that was serious. You know, time was money. So when we had time, we would sit and harmonize and all of that in the studio, but we didn't have time to like go out hanging out, partying or anything like that.
So how did session work at that point? You know, you said it was in the studios and time was money. Did it work differently than it would work today? Did you have to be like...
First of all, everything was recorded at the same time. In those days, the full orchestra, the singers, the soloists, everybody was in the studio at the same time. They only had 4-track studios. So everything had to be done. Everybody had to be on time and ready to go. Excuse me. There was no messing about or anything like that. It was serious business. And I learned a lot. And as I said, I didn't read music. I didn't read. Leslie didn't read. Kiki didn't read. But we would get booked by like the Maggie Stratter with the Ladybirds. Maggie knew that we didn't read. So if she booked us or booked me for anything, she would be really helpful. She was the one who was on Benny Hill. That was Maggie Stratter, yeah. And she was the Ladybirds. And the Ladybirds and the Breakaways all came from Liverpool. They had been Vernon girls, all of them, you know, so they'd all had some experience. So I learned a lot from them, and, you know, just sitting talking with them, because I didn't know anybody. The only person I knew was Dusty. I had some friends who were from Trinidad, but they didn't know anything. They weren't in the music business or anything. They knew about steel drums, but that was pretty much it.
When did I'm hoping I'm getting my timeline right, but the track "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me," wasn't that in the later part of the 60s? And how did that come up for you?
It wasn't in the late. I recorded that as part of an album. I think was it on the Bells Are Poppin' album, which was my first album. That was about 1966. And it was just an album track. And I recorded it because the demo was Dee Dee Warwick. I did a couple of things that Dee Dee Warwick had done the vocal, and she did a much better version than I did. She was always my favorite singer out of the whole family. But as I said, and it was just sheer fluke that Philips in London sent some recordings over to America. And one of their labels was Mercury, I think it was. And one of the guys at Mercury liked "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me," and he printed up 10,000 copies and sent them around America, and the DJs picked up on it. And then I got a call saying, "You got a record in the hit parade."
How was that feeling, for you then, back then? How was that feeling? Because you'd come from America, you'd taken this risk, and then suddenly you're back, in a sense, in America, yeah, as a star in that sense.
Yeah, it was wonderful, wonderful feeling. And when they said to me, "You're going to have to go to the States to promote it," which was great. I had gigs to do, and my backing band was Status Quo. And when I left, they were going into the studio, and when I came back, they were already in the charts. They had just recorded "Pictures of Matchstick Men." That was my backing band.
This was the period you go back to the States. This has happened to you. You come back, and then Blue Mink, who had already started, came to you. Isn't that right?
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
It was about 1966 that "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me." I came back. I did a tour with the Four Tops, thanks to Brian Epstein. So I got a chance to promote the song and everything. But Blue Mink, I knew all the musicians because as I said, we used to record everything at the same time. So we used to see each other sometimes on a daily basis, all of us. And I got a call from Roger Coolham, who was keyboard. And he said, "Me and the guys have been doing an album, doing some recording, and it's all instrumental, and we thought it might be a bit boring if we don't put some vocals on. So can you come and do some vocals?" No problem. And it wasn't like it was a session, it was a favor. So I went in, did the vocal. 2 days later, he called me back again and said, "Roger Cooke has written this song, and we think it'd be good as a duet. Can you come in and do it?" And that was Melting Pot. And we did 3 takes of it. Came back in the control box, listened to it, and one of the guys said, "We should put this out as a single. Do you want to join the group?" And me and Roger just looked at each other and just thought, yeah, why not? We all know each other, so why not? It was that simple.
Harmonies were very important to that group, weren't they? There was something really wonderful about.
Well, that was always me and Roger who did all the vocals. And I found out that ABBA were heavily influenced by Blue Mink. And this guy has written 2 thick books, which he sent me. I can't find me in the book because I don't even know where to look. But he said to me, ABBA were really big fans of Blue Mink. That's how they learned their harmonies and everything, listening to Blue Mink. And also they were into Roger Cooke and Roger Greenaway's writing. you know, because of them writing all of their stuff as well. So
that's amazing. That is
yeah,
fantastic. But I'm sure they're not the only band, they're not the only singers that you've influenced in your life. I'm sure there
oh,
are
I'm
many
sure.
others.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, one of our keyboard players was named Reggie Dwight.
Well, yeah, what happened to him?
What happened to him? What happened?
Actually, the day we're speaking, it's his 75th birthday. I don't know if you know that.
What day?
Elton John's 75 today, yeah.
Oh, bless him. Bless him. Oh.
I'll come to him again later, because you actually worked on his self-titled album. That was his second album that really sort of started his career, and also on Honky Chateau. But first,
and Tumbleweed Connection.
Oh wow, yeah, which is one of my favorites as well.
If you want to stay alive, that's us as well.
So come to Melting Pot again, because Blue Mink were very progressive in a lot of ways in terms of their lyrics. You know, there was songs which were sort of about the environment. Melting Pot was, you know, a very racially aware song.
It's been banned. The BBC, it's been banned, totally banned. The BBC, thanks to Tony Blackburn and Emperor Roscoe, who played it nonstop. I've actually got a video of them playing it nonstop. They promoted it and helped us get to the top 3. Tony Blackburn actually presented us with a silver disc, which is up on the wall. Yeah, I don't have many of those, but it's on the wall. So the BBC backed them when they were backing us. But recently, a couple of years ago, someone complained about Mixed with Yellow Chinky. They didn't like that. One person, it probably wasn't an Asian, because I've sung this song all over the world and asked people, if the staff, like on the cruise ship, who are all Asian, and they said, no, we love the song. We love it. We like the fact that we're being mentioned, you know, that we don't mind that. One person complained to the BBC about 2 years ago, and they banned it.
It's a shame, because it's a song with an underlying theme of hope, of equality.
They never even got to the chorus, because if they'd gotten to the chorus, they would understand the storyline, but they never got to the chorus. And that was the second time it had been banned, for the same reason that the one DJ in 3 home county radio or something put it on, heard "Take a Pinch of White Man, Wrap It Up in Black Skin," and snatched it off and said, this is racist. He never even got to the chorus. And the same thing happened again. But, you know, Melting Pot was stopped from getting any higher, thanks to 2 little boys have 2 little toys. So, you know, this is what the music business is like.
Well, that is shocking.
Sugar Sugar was #1 for 5-6 weeks, and we were quickly coming up the charts. And then Rolf Harris came out with this one track, and I had to review it for one of the music papers. I think it was Disc or Record Mirror or something like that. And I said, this record has no chance. You know, it just didn't stop my mouth. He passed us and stopped us from getting any higher. And Sugar Sugar dropped down to 2. We stayed at #3, and Rolf Harris got to #1 with 2 little boys. And to this day, I don't understand why they never saw that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. How did that change your life, having success?
Well, it gave us constant work. And Blue Mink were together for 4.5 years. And we got a chance to tour, you know, and we went to New Zealand, because By the Devil got into the charts. It was like #1 in the charts down there. And it was sold 16,000, which was the equivalent to 1 million sales. So we had a good time, and we did all the clubs in the UK. We worked our butts off, but we would come off stage in somewhere like Stockton-on-Tees, and some of us would get in the car and drive all the way down to London to be in the studio for 10 o'clock in the morning, because we couldn't risk, we knew that this wasn't going to last forever. And all the guys in the band were all experienced, you know, they knew it wasn't going to last forever. So we were working all the time. So we were working at night doing the clubs, and then the in the middle of the night driving all the way down the M1 or the M6 to do the studio work, and then getting back in the car and driving all the way back up north to be on stage at 9, 10 o'clock that night. I mean, we worked our asses off. Seriously.
Did you often not know who you were going to be doing sessions with when you, so tell me a sort of story about where you turn up and you don't know who it is, and then suddenly you appear in front of someone.
We turned up at Olympic in Barnes, and it was myself, Rosetta Hightower, and Sonny Leslie from Sue and Sonny, who were great singers. And it was for Joe Cocker. We didn't even know who he was. Nobody knew who he was. He apparently had been waiting a while to get us to do the backing vocals. He told us what he wanted us to do. You know, can you work out some vocals on this? So me, Rosetta, and Sonny worked out all the backing vocals on. We didn't get the credit for it though. The record producer, Denny, well, I can't remember what his name was. He took the credit. We did that. We worked out the backing vocals. That was one session. Me and Doris Troy and Nanette Workman is her name. We were booked for a session. We didn't know who the artists were. We didn't get there until like 11 o'clock at night, and that was for the Stones. You can't always get what you want. And we did a few sessions like that. Like there were new artists and no one knew who they were. And then we would be on the record, and the record would be a hit. Need a love to last forever. Need a love to last forever. Ooh, that's me.
Oh, wow.
That's the everlasting love. I mean, we did so much, and we didn't know who the people were when we got there. And we were doing, I mean, it got to the point where we would, some of us, I mean, I was doing 3 sessions a day, 3-hour sessions a day, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. You're up 24 hours. And when we did the Rolling Stones, when we arrived, we hadn't eaten all day because we'd been working. And Mick said to us, would you girls like something to eat? And we said, yeah, we'd love something to eat, you know, already like agog looking at Mick Jagger. And about half an hour later, all of this hot food arrived, and we knew we thought we made it now. This was the first time we'd ever been experienced hot food at midnight. All came in one of those hostess trolleys. So
what about John Lennon? You also performed with John Lennon, didn't you?
Yeah, John, well, we knew who that was for. Doris Troy she was signed to Apple. So she had booked me to do the Billy Preston session with George, and she booked me to do Ringo session with George at Apple. And also she booked me along with, there were 15 singers booked to be at Apple at 6 o'clock. We all turned up, and only to find that John had changed his mind and decided he wanted to record at his house. We didn't see John, we just got this message. So there was a bus waiting for us. We went from Apple in Savile Row all the way to Sunningdale, to his house in Sunningdale. We get there, and John had changed his mind again and decided he wanted to record at EMI, which wasn't known as Abbey Road, as popular as it is now. It was EMI. But some food had been laid on for us because we'd been traveling for a couple of hours and still hadn't done anything. So there was all this food. So they said, we've laid out food for you. John told us to prepare food, blah, blah, blah. And I asked if I could go in that white room, which I did. So I got a chance to go into the white room and see the white piano and all of that. Get back on the bus, go back to London, back to EMI, all pile into EMI studio. I think it was Studio One. It was the same studio that I had first originally recorded in a few years before then. And John came down the stairs, and we're all like, it's John. And that was the first time we saw him. He comes down the stairs with Yicky Yicky, that's what Nanette named her, Yoko, he Nanette was from Jackson, Mississippi, so half Jewish with this southern accent. She said, "Oh, here comes Yicky Yicky." Nanette also is the voice, the honky tonk woman. Mickey, when Mick heard her voice, he said, "That's the accent I want on this." So that's Nanette that you hear singing that. Anyway, John comes down the stairs with Yoko. And he said, "We're not ready for you yet." He said, "If there's anything you need, the canteen is open. We'll be open all night. Anything you want, just camp out," which is what we did. And we're down in the studio and we can see something going on up in the control box. And in the control box was John, Alan Klein, who was basically responsible for the Beatles breaking up, and Yoko, and Phil Spector, because Phil Spector produced the track, and they were having a huge argument. You could see hands flying about. We couldn't hear what they were saying, but we could see. Anyway, John eventually came downstairs after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and said, "This is what I want you to sing. Power to the people." We did it. He said, came down again after a couple of tries, and he said, "Can you be a bit more aggressive? Can you stomp your feet? If you hear the record, that's the first thing you hear on the record is these marching feet. That's us." He said, if you stomp your feet, make it a bit more aggressive. And he moved the carpet. So he said, "No, I don't want the carpet. I want really loud noise," because there was dust coming up from the carpet. Then he came back down again and said, "Can you do it really like?" So we did it with our arms up, Black Power, or power to the people, power. And that's all you can hear that. And that was it. We did it in a couple of takes. That was it. The next day, Doris Troy phoned and said, "Honey, I got your money." We were paid the next day, which was so unusual because usually you had to wait for a check to be sent in the mail. But she rang and said, "Your money is here." So I went down to Apple and got my money. So that was the session for John. And I never saw him again.
Oh, wow. And
what he was always a Beatle because he was outspoken. Yeah, sorry.
What was Yoko's involvement in that track if she was there?
As far as I could see, nothing. She just followed him down the stairs and she followed him up the stairs. And I saw it said that she's credited for being one of the backing singers. Well, if she was there when we weren't there. She wasn't on the recording with us. And I don't know what I did with it. There's actually a photo from that session, and John and Yoko are on it, and all the singers and everything. I don't know what I did with that photo. Somebody sent it to me.
Now, we mentioned Elton John before, who's 75 today, the day that we're talking. Reg Dwight, as he was known when you met him. So you worked with him on 3 albums, as you've mentioned.
And a show, and did a couple of things with him.
How was it to work with Elton John?
It was okay because I knew him. Didn't have a problem at all. I mean, he was one of the lads as far as us working, because he had been like a T-boy, and also he had worked with Blue Mink, so he wasn't going to go big time on me. But he never did. He wasn't big time with any of us. He was just so glad that we were there. Literally, he was genuinely happy that we were all there supporting him. We were being paid, but we were all there. And on the original recording session, I mean, except for Roger Coulomb, who was keyboard, all of Blue Mink was on that black album, that Black Cupboard album. So, and Roger Cooke had produced Empty Sky, which was his first album. So he already knew, and because Roger Cooke was with Dick James Music, so he was always in Denmark Street. So everybody knew everybody else,
I mean, we've gone through gospel, we've gone through your listening and your love of R&B. We've gone through, the popular music with Blue Mink and your work with other people, the sessions that you made. You eventually moved, if that's the right word, into being a jazz singer. How did that development come about?
Hey, I'm not a jazz singer. I'm just a singer who, in the studios, you had to do everything. You had to learn how to do everything. And I would get sessions where I had to sing jazz or a pop or classical or foreign language. I did an Avon commercial in 4 different languages, and to this day I don't know what I was singing, because they had to do it almost line by line. But you know, it wasn't that I ever declared myself as a jazz singer, because I'm not. I'm just a singer. But you had to be ready to and able to perform whatever the producers wanted when you walked in the studio. And if they wanted you to sing some jazz, then you sang it, because that's what you were being paid to do. But I'd say this, I'm just a singer. You know, I mean, I do Ronnie Scott's and the 606 and all of that, but I've never ever said, I mean, I was so nervous about doing Ronnie Scott's after being asked for 27 years, and I said yes. And when Ronnie came back and handed me a piece of paper with a date on it, in 6 weeks' time, I was a nervous wreck for the next 6 weeks, because it meant me having to stand in a jazz club. And that it always scared me, because I just thought, you know, there's some big shoes to fill. Anyway, I did Ronnie Scott's, and from the first night, it was wonderful, because I just thought, I'm not a jazz singer, but I did Great Balls of Fire. And that was in April 1987, first time I did Ronnie's. And if I did Ronnie's tomorrow, Great Balls of Fire would be in the set, because that's what people expect. And a medley of Jailhouse Rock and Rock Around the, you know, all of that stuff. But I mean, of course, I always do Stevie. There's always some Stevie Wonder in my set. But I just do what I want to do, but I'm not a jazz singer. I'm not a jazz singer. I'm not a pop singer. I'm not a rock singer. I'm just a singer. Tell me what you want me to sing, and I'll try.
Well, you've just mentioned Stevie Wonder.
There's my boy.
Yeah, okay. Then I think anything you take from Stevie Wonder, I'm going to love, because I love Stevie Wonder. So,
well, I got a chance to work with him as well. I've told this story so many times, but there was one day, it was, I don't know, 70, 71. And it was a Tuesday morning. And I'll tell you how I know in a minute. And the phone rang. It was 10 o'clock. And this guy came on the phone and he said, is that Madeline Bell? Yes. He said, my name is blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm Stevie Wonder's manager. And I went, yeah, right. You know, like Stevie Wonder's manager is going to be ringing me. And he said, I was given your number. Steve opened last night at the Talk of the Town. Yes, I know, because I was already planning to go. And he sang his latest record, but he didn't have the backing singers. And I was wondering if you would be able to come along with it and bring another singer to do the backing vocals for him at the Talk of the Town for the next 2 weeks. What? Yeah. Well, can you be at the Royal Garden Hotel at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock? Yeah. Okay. I quickly ring up Pat Arnold, P.P. Arnold. She went, girl, yeah. So we met up at the Royal Garden Hotel. I told this at Pizza Express. That's why it's still so fresh. That's actually on YouTube. We met at the Royal Garden Hotel, went up to Stevie's suite. He greeted Steve, and it was, you know, Stevie Wonder. He had just dropped the Little Stevie Wonder. Before then, he was always known as Little Stevie Wonder. He was 6 feet thin. And he took us into his bedroom, which had keyboards all the way around the room. And he went to the one particular keyboard, and he played this. And he said, oh, this is what I want you to sing. Here I am, baby. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Yeah. That's all we had to sing, was that one song at the end of his set at the Talk of the Town for 2 weeks. They said, we can only pay you $200 a week. We would have paid them. Yeah. So I had 2 weeks with Stevie Wonder at the Talk of the Town. And then I've seen him quite a few times since then. You know, we bump into each other, and he's actually in his dressing room in Jakarta. He actually accompanied me singing Lately.
oh, wow. Another beautiful song.
Yeah. And I always do this, always a Stevie song in my set, no matter where I am. And to the point that, oh God, see, this moves on a lot further on, but I mean, I worked with the jazz orchestra of the Concertgebouw from Amsterdam, and we do the Ray Charles program because we promoted the film Ray in Holland. And then they decided, shall we do, for first part, we can do Stevie Wonder. So we do Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles in first half, Stevie Wonder in second half.
Oh, wow. Well, Madeline, this hour's gone really quick, so I've got to come to my final question, which is a bit of a shame, but I wanted to talk about representation again, and it connects to Stevie Wonder because obviously, as he is one of the greatest figures in music, and he obviously has been, you know, a figure of representation for a lot of younger Black artists, but you have as well. Throughout your life, what sort of things have people come up to you and said to you in terms of how you've helped them without knowing it, how you've helped them in their careers? Because I'm sure that must have happened.
Well, I mean, I've had singers say to me, oh, well, I remember you when I was a kid, and I always wanted to do this, and I always wanted to sing that song, and my mom and dad, they love your singing, and you inspired me, but you know, I mean, you don't know how you did it. It's all in their lives and in their hearts, but you don't. I mean, I just stand there and sing the song. I always try to think. I tend to sing and talk with my eyes closed because I'm picturing what I'm talking about. And when I'm singing, I like to be in the story, be in the picture. So if I'm singing a Stevie song, you know, if it's magic, then why can't it be everlasting? You know, I'm thinking about what I'm singing. So hopefully that comes through, and that is what inspires a lot of younger people to do what I do. You know, I mean, I don't like to think of myself as any kind of teacher. I mean, I'm not, and I've done workshops and things in Holland, and I keep saying to them, I'm not a musician. I can't write music. I can't play music. I don't play. And it said, yeah, but we just want your experience. We want to know what you did and how you did it, and that's me. You know, I don't know how I don't know what I do for other people, but if it makes them feel good and helps them to move on, then that's fantastic. I'm really good at advice.
Well, Madeline, look, thank you so much. And yeah, let's catch up again at some point.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.